What's up, everybody? It's your name, man, Killer B. Dog always find a general. You got a witch, I'll burn them up. I got a very interesting video I want to do today, and hopefully we all learn something, right? Let's see if I got my. What's up with this? I don't have my thing queued up here. Well, I do got the witch.
Humanity to man portrayed on the screen so vividly
that
you
Witchfinder theme
this
song.
man showed no mercy in the pursuit and interrogation of his victims. He was called the Witchfinder General.
Hold tight. Get your pen and your paper. Get your ears wide open, your eyes wide open. And hopefully we have a good time. Apologize for not having some words at the bottom. I had to use an alternate account because I ran out of time on my other phone. I could have swore I added in here. Listen, unfortunately I don't. I'll be sure to put the supporters in the comment. I'll put the supporters in the comments. At the end of the video. Great time for everybody to hit the like button, share, don't forget the notification bell if you're not already. So with that, let's get this thing going on.
Burning witches in they sin. You can't buy, you can't die. I know what y'all see. Just as flesh decay, but eternally. I don't see it that way.
I'll be right back.
But your cult gonna leave people dead. Claim God, and God don't know you. Watch your desires overthrow you. Man fall down, man go boom. Mask wearing like doom. All caps like y'all yelling. That's a rap. Might as well be felons. Y'all words are lepers. On YouTube, acting precious. This the nexus. Feel the sun from the solar plexus. Taste the breakfast. Finding all those devices that detect us. Yo, show respect, cuz.
And what line of business might you be in?
God's business. Witch finding.
Which finding? Oh, that's
Y'all
nice. That's
looking for
very
that next buzz or some hugs. Watch the general pull plugs. Internet warriors caught up in dark corridors. Fiction like Mordor. Should have stayed on the floor. Y'all know no origins. Laughing orphans, even though we got royal blood coursing. No more horsing. Real life's more important. Y'all speaking curses on yourself. Claiming God and no one else. Blast you off the shelf. Burn your whole library. I see him do it. Look, y'all claim and learn. Reading from the Jewish books. Y'all some cookie crooks. Lips caught up with a hook. Spooky beats drive me wild. Get stabbed from a knife holding child. Old man, old style. Used to pull kelp out the Nile. And I did it with a smile. Fake brews, smell vile. Rock like Hendrix at the aisle. After a while, see gypsies on trial. Yeah, you, the one claiming brew. Unglued and unruly. Expose their actions fully. Call me a bully, but that's fine. This is how you get bullied straight from the mind. Burning them.
Sweet cats out there. Don't even have faith in y'all. They claim they read all this, that they know all this. Claiming they speaking languages, speaking curses.
Be the first to see it. Be the first to talk about it. The Witchfinder General. Man's inhumanity.
All right, you doggone right. It's the Witchfinder General. I'm back on my thing again. This video prompted a video that I saw from one of my members and one of my good friends and stuff, Vengeance. I'm a Hebrew Israelite that came out and said that I gotta put it in. Oh my God. Unbelievable. Okay, I gotta pause that. Okay, I'll come back to that. I don't know who the heck that was. But Hebrew Israelite that came out about being with a transgender woman. He did a video, and according to the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, he was on point. according to the Hebrew Israelite doctrine. Now, I've been studying certain scriptures, dealing with certain topics and stuff like that. You know, sometimes I play devil's advocate, sometimes I dig deep and research deep into certain scriptures and their meanings. Like, right, what is really being said here, and why is it being said? And try to put things in context of, the paragraph or the chapter that's in there, right? So, let's see something here. The type of, one second. What's this? All right. All right. I'm not gonna. Is this gonna be a 2-part video? Maybe 3. But yeah, there's some certain scriptures. I went through the other ones I'm gonna do videos on, but this was the most interesting that I dove into, and it was Romans 1:26-27, right? And I know there's a lot of things where the King James Bible says one thing, you look at the other translations, it don't really hit the same as the King James Version. Some people say, oh, because the other ones are all fake, and King James was ordained by the Most High God to commission this Bible to be written, and we should only deal with the King James and stuff like that, right? So we'll deal with like the original languages and stuff like that too. This is a journal entry that's coming from, I'm going to share it at the end of the series that I do. To the International Journal of Research in Humanities and Social Studies by my name Robert Noose from Loyola University, New Orleans. And the abstract for it says, many conservative Christians condemn same-sex relations, especially among women, by quoting Paul's statement in Romans 1:26-27. But this passage really condemns what we're going to get into is the ISIS cult, as I put in the title. Practice in Rome during Paul's age. The animals mentioned in Romans 1 correspond to the animals' images of gods popular in the ISIS cult. The unnatural sex practices by the women refer to the behavior of ISIS priestesses, and immoral men refer to castrated male priests in the ISIS cult. Right? So I'm going to share my screen here. Like I said, I'm going to give you guys a copy of this when I'm done. Those of you smart enough to be able to pull it up before I'm done with the series. Right? All right. So actually, guys, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. I shouldn't be interrupted now. All right. Let's get into this thing here. I might open up the panel afterwards and stuff. Feel free to comment and stuff on what you think about this. Everything here. So here we go. A close study of biblical passage in Rome 1:26-27 is extremely significant in our contemporary age with the raging debate over gay rights and gay identity. Conservative religionists condemn homosexual behavior and sometimes homosexual identity altogether, declaring it to be a perversion. They often quote the Bible to justify their viewpoints. The most commonly quoted passage in this regard is a statement by Paul in Romans chapter 1, 26 to 27. Even for those people in our society who are not religious and do not care what the Bible says, it's necessary to be aware of this passage because so many conservative spokespersons appeal to it, right? The conservative critic of homosexual behavior once said to me, if all other biblical passages can be shown to be irrelevant homosexual debate, at least I have one certain biblical text that clearly condemns homosexuality. He, of course, was referring to Romans 1, 26 to 27. This passage has been used for years to condemn both male and female homosexual behavior. Conservatives have declared that it is the clearest condemnation of such sexual behavior that you can read in the Bible. I believe, however, that people are not reading this passage clearly, nor are they reading it in its larger context. I will reproduce Romans 1, 22 to 27, for I believe we need the entire context to see what Paul is really saying. In Romans 1, 22 to 27 reads, claiming to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, resembling a mortal human being, birds, or four-footed animals, or reptiles. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the degrading of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to degrading passion. Their women exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. 27. And in the same way, also the men, giving up natural intercourse with women, were consumed with passion for one another. Men committed shameless acts with men and received their own persons the due penalty for their error. The opponent of homosexuality quotes the last two verses and declares that here we have a clear condemnation of both male and female homosexuality. I would respond by saying that we must observe how verse 26 begins. The words are, for this reason. That initial statement means that the gay behavior is a result of the idolatry described in the previous verse. In other words, the idolatry and the gay behavior go together and describe the same people. Sophisticated critics of gay behavior do indeed observe this also. They observe that Paul believed idolatry in general to be a root of sin that could lead to sexual perversion, including homosexuality, and their discussion is there. But the point I wish to make is that Paul is not speaking about all homosexuals. He's speaking about a specific group of homosexuals who engage in a particular form of idolatrous worship, not just general idolatry. The idolatry that is described in this theomorphic representation of God or the gods. Theomorphic means representing something in the form of an animal. Paul says that this group of people portrays God or their gods as animals, as birds, four-footed animals, or reptiles in verse 23. He repeats the notion again in verse 25, when he says that they worship the creature. When in verse 26, Paul says that because of this worship activity, these people are given over to homoerotic behavior. In particular, he notes that the men give up natural heterosexual love for homosexual love. Who is Paul describing? The only group of people in the Mediterranean world who portrayed their gods as animals were the Egyptians. In Rome, the significant, important Egyptian cult. In Rome, the significant, important Egyptian cult was the worship of the goddess Isis. A history on how the Isis cult spread through the Roman Empire may be found in Robert Turkin, 75 through 104. Isis was portrayed as a human female, but her son Horus was portrayed as a falcon. Others accompanying Egyptian deities were portrayed as an ibis, or just cloth, a cow, Hathor sometimes, a lioness, Tefnut, a ram, comb, a hippopotamus, Taweret, and Seth sometimes, a cat, Bastet, a jackal or a dog, Anubis, a crocodile, Sobet, a beetle, Kefri, Iris, etc. Isis could also be merged with Hathor. In the any of the devout, Anubis was a special companion of Isis. With 124, 25, Solomon 56, 57, 198, and 209. Isis was called Queen of Heaven in Egypt after the rule of Ptolemy I, 300 CE. And she was portrayed as a gracious mother to Horus and a deity who loved humanity. In this list, you might notice Paul's reference to a human figure, Isis, a bird, Horus, and a four-footed animal, Hathor. Three deities most popular in the Isis cult. In the public and very flamboyant cultic processions at Rome, Isis priests carried images of animal-faced gods and other unusual objects, including a golden urn with sacred water from the Nile. They also wore costumes of these particular deities. Lucius Publius, 125-170 CE, in his classic work, The Golden Ass observed someone dressed as Anubis, portrayed as a dog, another person dressed as a divine cow, which was probably Hathor, in a colorful Isis parade. Devotees in this parade frequently at altars along the roads with their sumptuous and magnificent displays, thus making quite an impression on common Romans. Q1 97. Lucius Publius provided, if I'm pronouncing that right, provided a length of vivid descriptions of supernatural vision of Isis, and an actual spectacular Isis parade witnessed by Lucius. The lead character in the novel, the Golden Ass, Apuleius 543 to 67. The parade was called the Ploephesia, or the Navigium Isis, a springtime blessing of ships that celebrated the beginning of the navigation of ships after the dangerous winter storms were over. It was supposed to call upon Isis to defend the ships from the caprice of Neptune, god of the sea. This festive parade, along with other European parades, would evolve eventually into our Mardi Gras festival parades, which we gaily celebrate here in New Orleans. The parade would feature a masked person, a woman in purest white gowns, soloists waving the garments of goddess Isis, the adultery with torches, hymnals, singers with flutes, brass, silver, and gold instruments playing constantly. The initiates into the cult of Isis. Priests with the shaven heads, linen robes, who carried images of animal-faced gods and strange symbols, such as the urn covered with hieroglyphics and the images of a coiled snake containing Nile water. And 8, most importantly, the image of the goddess Isis. During the raid, flower petals will be strewn about, and participants would wear elaborate regalia, sparkling headdresses, grotesque costumes of hunters, gladiators, magistrates, philosophers, fishermen, bird catchers, and others, while some would even cross-dress. Animals such as tame bears, apes, asses will be dressed to appear like nobility. There were gleaming lights and shimmering mirrors to add more sparkle to the nighttime spectacle. Came out 97.30 and Vini 461.63, Albert 40. The average Roman would have been familiar with the theromorphic imagery, even for the gods to which Paul alludes. In Paul's Roman audience would ultimately have thought of them when he alludes to animals in this initial statements. Romans were fascinated by the languishing songs and intoxicating melodies sung by the singers, and overall, I must ask myself, what would Paul's Roman audience have heard in their imaginations as this letter was read publicly to them? As Romans, the animal reference would have made them think of the Isis cult. The following language by Paul would continue to be connected to the Isis cult in their minds as they associated with the Isis priestesses and priests. As well, I will not ask what did Paul think of homosexuality. I will ask what did his audience hear when he wrote what he did. And they would have thought of the Isis cult. Furthermore, I am sure that Paul intended for them to think of the ISIS cult. I could probably, this is me speaking here. You could go back to, what is it, Exodus, where it talks about the should not lie with men. I believe that's Exodus. What is it? I forgot the chapter. But if you read that chapter, it's talking about the doings of Egypt. Right? Do not be as the Egyptians. Right? Let me continue. Something popped in my head. Bible commentators generally pay little attention to Paul's reference to animals. Bernadette Bruton noted in Paul's allusions most likely were inspired by the Egyptian deities. She also drew the parallel with wisdom, probably Wisdom of Solomon, maybe. 15, 18, and 19, and the Jewish philosopher Judaeus Philo on the Decalogue 7680, authors who condemn the use of animals as the images for God. Bruton 231-32. Bruton, however, did not conclude that Paul may have been describing in particular the Isis cult in Rome. Both Philo and the author of Wisdom of Solomon lived in Egypt and were quite familiar with the theromorphic images. The text in Wisdom of Solomon 15:18 says that, I was right, I guess, says that the foolish worship even the most hated animals, which are worse than all others. Paul might have shared the invective of Wisdom of Solomon and Philo on this matter, for he was apparently familiar at least with the former work, as commentators have noted in the past. The classical scholar R.E. Witt is one of the few who maintain that Paul alludes to the Egyptian animal gods in Romans 1:23. And in particular, Paul had in mind Anubis, the jackal god, Thoth, the abyss god, Bast, the cat god, Edja, the cobra god, Sobek, the crocodile god, with 255. And the Isis cult, male priests had to abstain from sexual activity during ceremonies and festivals. And there were virgin priestesses who did not marry. Lucius Apuleius, in his ancient literary work, implied that the male priests really practiced chastity. And the character Lucius said that priesthood was too great a burden to bear. so he could not become an Isis priest after his dramatic conversion. Apuleius 570-71. Perpetual sexual abstinence by men would not have been viewed favorably in the moral climate of Rome, where so much emphasis was placed upon the family. Paul's reference to men who give their sexuality might describe sexuality absence, might describe sexually abstinent priests, who then presumably could love only each other, according to the popular gossip of Romans. In the side comment about the women loving each other might be a reference to the priestesses who were supposed to be virgin. Notice, however, that Paul does not say that the women directly love one another. We assume that he says that women gave up natural love for unnatural love, which could mean unusual sexual behavior with men or some other form of sexual behavior that does not procreate. We do not know for sure what he means. Some critical scholars have made a good argument that Paul is condemning non-cultural heterosexual activity by these women. Miller, 1995, 1-11, DeBell, 39-64. David Murphy, in particular, documents a number of ancient authors who refer to sex, secondary to nature, or unnatural sex as male-female sexual activity that could include oral or anal sex, as well as other non-productive forms of sexual behavior. Thus, to assume that unnatural sex refers only to lesbianism, as many readers of our text have done, is very incorrect. Murphy 221-20. Paul sees their activity as unnatural sex, which usually means wasted sperm in most general sex. Right now, I'm going to stop right there for 1 second and talk about the Hebrew Israelite cult vows involvement. One of the things that was taught was like when you have sex, it was to procreate, not for leisure. And if it was, it should be done with a concubine or a prostitute, as Ray Millstone could put it, right? And we should not waste our semen. Our semen should not hit the ground is one thing that they would teach. Like, you know, I'm just telling you what was taught in the Hebrew Israelite community back in the day. Now there's so many splinter groups, it has watered down drastically, right? From the original teachings of the cult, right? And it was a setting for, they said, for your semen to hit the ground. Well, let's go off here. Hence, if sperm is assumed, then a man must be involved with the woman in the reference of Romans 1:26b. Townsley, 2011, 171-712. Paul may be condemning sexual activity between the priestesses and the male priest that might have involved use of an artificial phallus by the female on the male. For that is what Clement of Alexandria seems to be condemning around 200 CE when he speaks of these cults. Townsley, 2011, 725-726, right? And we know that ISIS used an artificial phallus to conceive Horus. A lot of people, I believe, know that. The earliest church father to assume that Roman 1:26 describes lesbian activity was John Chrysostom in 400 CE. Townsley 2011, 710-711. Women priests often had sex with the castrated galley priest of the cult of Attis in Sabo. And this may have involved oral sex or artificial devices also. Townsley 2011, 725-726. Significantly, lesbian women are mentioned nowhere else in the Bible, presumably because female same-sex did not offend. It did not involve penetration. It did not humiliate a man, either a slave, prisoner of war, or of youth, or a youth. And it did not ultimately affect procreation. Now, this, as you get the story with a lot of Hebrew Israelites that get at the whole so-called Kemetic community and stuff, right? About the story with Seth trying to rape what's his name? Osiris, right? Now, that thing wasn't about just like homosexual sex. What it was that Seth was belittling Osiris to say, hey, I'm dominating you. So those were the things that it was a big difference between the giver and the receiver. The receiver was looked at the lowly person as the punk, as people would say, right? So it wouldn't, in a way, in modern terms, like you hear people say, oh, jailhouse people will tell you, oh, I ain't gay because I didn't receive. I'm gay, right? Hold on one second, y'all. I can hold my food. Hold on one second. All right, right. So, it does not ultimately affect procreation. Thus, it did not affect male pride. Why does Paul even mention it here? Why does he mention it before male homoerotic behavior? I believe he is thinking of mystery cult priestesses, and in particular, the priestess of Isis. Just like in Exodus, when it talks about don't be Egyptian. It was talking to the priests, who were very visible in Rome during their Isis celebrations. A critique of the Isis cult will begin with them. In fact, that Paul mentions women before men is important. I believe because his invective is directed primarily against the Isis cult. Some scholars might counter my argument by pointing out that traditional Roman piety particularly despised female homoeroticism, and Paul may be speaking to female homosexuality in general. Jude 2:31 to 32. But this traditional Roman might have further encouraged Paul to imply that Isis priestesses were engaging in behavior that offended traditional Roman rights. That's deep. Because it wasn't sort of like where Paul kind of questioned like the Rome, like, yo, man, it's in Rome and all this stuff, right? How familiar would Paul have been with the Isis cult? Classical scholars point out that the Isis cult was major Paul's home. In many of the cities he visited on his missionary travels. This is deep. This is where a lot of archaeology and all that stuff comes into play. About the timeline and when Paul goes around, where he lived, what was dominant, what was going on at that time where he lived at, in the places that he visited at that time. The Isis cult had several shrines in Tarsus. In a great province of Sicilia, where Tarsus is located. Isis was known by her longer name as Isis Myronephus. I think that's how you pronounce that. In Ephesus, where Paul stayed for a length of time, Isis and Artemis were equated with 256-66, Turcan 75 to 129. The male companion of Isis was Serapis, the Greek version of Osiris' name. Now, this throws a little monkey wrench in the whole hotel thing because they say that Serapis was Jesus. But then, you know what I'm saying? But then they'll turn around and say, who Horus was Jesus. And he had, let me continue, and he had shrines of Iconium and Theopolis and Apollonia. Damn, tongue twisted. Places where Paul made or passed through. In Corinth, a city, important city for Paul, Isis had 2 temples, and Serapis had 1, with 260. Paul was familiar with the Isis cult and his allusion to sounding brass and tinkling cymbals. In the letter of Corinthians, right? Remember that scripture? You Hebrew Israelites know that scripture about women tinkling. They walk and you hear tinkling bells and all that, right? Enticement might be a reference to the 2 instruments used in Isis worship and parades. See, to not only entice them, entice the worship of gods. Paul may be antagonized by the Isis cult for numerous reasons. As a monotheist, he was particularly offended by Isis, for she was the lover of the now imaginary of gods, with 268 of the Isis cult, or at least as it was popularly perceived, offended Paul. Perhaps what offended him most was the similarity between the beliefs of the Isis cult and Christianity. Both religions spoke of a god, Osiris or Serapis, and Jesus, who died and was yet alive. And devotees would experience immortality with Osiris or Jesus. Once again, here we go with Osiris, and then they, the whole Kemetic thing, they'll say Jesus was Horus. So somebody make up mind. Behind the grave, both Isis and Jesus offered forgiveness of sin. Right? Both Isis and Jesus were said to have deep, compassionate love. And that's another thing that don't match up. When you get these little corny debates out there, what's better for black people, the Kemetic science or the Bible and all that stuff? Or they stole it from Egypt and all this stuff, right? Now you see where they try to make it compare, you see here, it's not lined up with what they tell you, right? But that's a whole nother video. Both Isis and Jesus offered forgiveness of sin. Both Isis and Horus were said to have deep, compassionate love, right? So now they compare Jesus with the woman. I thought it was Jesus and Horus. In both religions, I don't want to make it the video about that. I'm going to stay on subject here. In both religions, the initiation was a water baptism. Christ and Isis created a radical healed the blind, as did Jesus. Dreams and visions were popular modes of revelations in both religions, with 586 to 57 to 58, 268. This copycat imagery of the Isis cult would have angered Paul greatly, though he would never have mentioned it directly, lest he give any credit to the Isis cult. Ultimately, when Christianity conquered the Roman Empire, imagery associated with ISIS was stolen. And attributed to Mary, including the title, Queen of Heaven, and the artistic portrayal of mother and child, Isis and Horus, Mary and Jesus, in artwork statuary. Romans in general did not like the cult of Isis. Its ethics often encouraged greater sexual freedom among devotees, even though abstinence for priests during festivals was advocated. And this sexual license offended the Romans. It was said that young men went to the Isis temple to have sexual adventures. Yeah, young men. Young men. Cumot 91. Both Caesar Augustus and Tiberius expelled the Egyptian gods from Rome on the charge of immortality in opposition to the social order because the new religion stressed the inner spiritual life over public interest. Qumran 39. Under Caesar Tiberius, 1537 CE, in particular, the ISIS priests of Rome were arrested and crucified. The temple of Isis was dismantled, and the followers were expelled from the city in 19 CE. That's interesting. Could that be the reason why the Romans are persecuting Christians or something? I don't know. Angus 38, Baker 395. The story is told that a noble lady was seduced by a man who lusted after her. So he disguised himself like the jackal god and convinced her to have sex with him. Because he was a god. How dumb was she? It's like some of the women out here that mess with the Hebrew Israelites. That's how dumb. He was a god. I mean, this scandal brought the harsh response of Tiberius, Wit 138. Already in the early years of his presence in Rome, the Roman Senate ordered Serapis, the Greek version of Osiris, Isis shrines destroyed 59, 58, 53, and 48 BCE due to corrupting influences engendered by the religion. Loose mortality and emotional piety connected to the cult. Caliuga, 37 to 41 CE, gave the ISIS movement a protective status. However, and the movement began to rebound in the next generation thereafter. Caliuga established the Navigium Isis, the flamboyant procession, and even participated in parade dressed in female garb. That would have been the time when Paul went to Rome. Rome women in particular were attracted to the emotional aspects of the ISIS cult, and to an equal degree, the Sibyl cult as well, Qumran 44. Paul's letter was written at the time when the ISIS cult was growing in popularity despite the hostility of many Romans. Thus, if Paul wrote this letter to the Romans, a group of folk he had not yet visited, it would have been most wise for him to condemn something as a form of immoral behavior that he knew most Romans did not like. That would be wise rhetoric on his part. Furthermore, Paul himself probably despised the ISIS cult for its similarity to Christianity. Thus, I believe that Paul is not condemning homosexuality in general. He is condemning the ISIS cult. I know that I cannot convince everyone with this argument by offering it as a thought-provoking suggestion. Other scholars suggest that Paul may be loosely condemning a wide range of goddess cults of the ancient Mediterranean world, all of which had followers in Rome. Excuse me. Goddesses such as, well, let me take a drink here. Goddesses such as Sable from Asia Minor, with dramatically castrated priests who carried their testicles in their hands. Artemis of Greece, Diana from Ephesus, Aphrodite, Greece, and Venus in Rome had eunuch priests and virgin priestesses as voluntaries in their service. Romans in general were critical in these cults. Most average Romans especially despised the cult of Sable because of the castrated priests. Townsley, 2011, 17, 15, 19. Paul would have encountered devotees of these cults throughout Greece and Rome. The existence of such temple servants can be found in Sumerian texts from the 3rd millennium BC. These texts describe Gala priests and Asinu priests who engaged in anal sex with worshippers who came to the temple. The word Asinu combines the Sumerian symbol for dog and woman, which probably gave rise to the slang in both Hebrew and Greek that called a male prostitute a dog. The Asinu priest may have been castrated. The male prostitute might have assumed the posture of a dog in the sexual act. Hence the insulting nickname in the ancient world and in the Bible. Remember when I told you about how the taker was looked down upon, right? Like as the dog, and you castrated, so you're obviously not the giver. If you're castrated, you have no testosterone. Right? We can be doing another lesson on the eunuchs too in the Bible. And they bust our heads open on that. There'd be a lot of mad people. But the Semitic goddess Ishtar had a single priest dedicated to her. And likewise, engaged in anal sex. In Greece, the priests were called galley priests. In particular, the cult assembled in Turkey had such priests. Lucius Apuleius refers to such eunuch priests, just said the word, eunuch priests, and attributes homoerotic desires and behaviors to them. If I'm not mistaken, didn't they say Jeremiah or Daniel, one of them were eunuchs? Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, y'all. Apuleius makes fun of them by portraying them in one of the narratives as oversexed and desirous of sex with a young boy, but disappointed when they discover that their gift for sex is a donkey. Towsey 211, 387, 89. Cybele was worshipped in Asia Minor as early as the 7th century BCE, in Greece by the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, and she came to Rome in 204 BCE to help the Romans defeat the Carthaginians and their general Hannibal in the Second Punic War. There subsequently became popular among small groups of devoted Romans. Do most Romans despise the cult? Vermesserine 3841, Turcar 2865, Townsley 2011 77 through 18. Someone was disseminated to Artagenis, a mother goddess of Syria, who was virtually identical to Ishtar. So there is continuity in all these traditions with the various female deities. Nicene, or however you pronounce it, 31, 32. You see something here. Hey, what's up, y'all? Hey, we're seeing y'all in the chat. Arcada GT, what's up? Guns and Roaches, yeah. Guns and Roaches, y'all crazy. Y'all tripping, man. The galley priests were known for their extreme behavior and extravagant personal appearance. On festival days, they would parade in the streets of Rome with a yellow long garment, chest ornaments. Got what they? I thought you get no disruptions. Hold on, y'all. One second, y'all. I'm sorry. Oh, get 1 second. Oh, no. One second here. All right. Almost done here. I'll probably end it after this paragraph because I'm more than halfway through. Actually, shit. Let me see something here. Let's see how far. Yeah, I can save that to later. I'll finish up this paragraph, this page here. And we'll move on tomorrow, maybe later tonight. I'll come and finish this. And I'll page 5 because 9 pages, but I think it ends before the 9. The galley priest was known for their extreme behavior and extravagant personal appearance. On festival days, they would. Okay, I read that already. Okay, yellow long garments, wearing chest ornaments, pendants, earrings, finger rings, bleached long hair that was disheveled or dressed and waved like that of a woman. Now, you remember when in the New Testament also talks about a man having long hair. Now, could that just be saying having long hair or have something to do with these cults? You know what I'm saying? So this is another thing. Instead of Christians just coming out and looking at these scriptures in a 2000 Western lens, they're not looking at these scriptures in the time. Y'all get what I'm saying? So it's a whole lot of things. Christians got to start, keeping it 100. Keeping it 100. Because, like, they'll take their little conservative views of what was presented to them by people of the past, early Christians. A lot of these from medieval on up Christians was some vile, disgusting people. Look at slavery and all these other crazy things that was going on. Right? So, but they'll disregard all of that and say, they're teaching the gospel. Look at all these famous people of the church, of these old churches, and how they lived and the things that they did. You know what I'm saying? So, all right, let's go. They will wear so much makeup on their faces, appear to be whitewashed walls. They flagellated themselves, flagging themselves, like breaking their skin, scarring themselves into blood flows, and neophytes would use sharp stone to castrate themselves. As Romans considered an incredible act of insanity. Self-castration would occur in a state of ecstasy, probably aided by the influence of drugs. It would have to be. These galley priests believed that the self-castration enabled them to become more like their gods, an idea that particularly would have horrified Paul. His reference to men giving up desire for women might be a loose reference to the self-castration practices in some cults, like that of Attis and Sable, where the self-castration occurred during moments of ecstasy, and the priests then carried their recently severed testicles around in their hands as a demonstration of piety, and sometimes threw them into homes. Damn. In Rome, the galley priests would dance in the streets of tamarines. I'm cooking something with mad hot peppers, y'all. So I'm like literally pepper spraying myself in the house. Yo, it's crazy. That's no reason I want to get out of here. And Rome, hold on one second, yo. I'm sorry. I apologize, yo. Let me take this thing off the stove. This shit killing me. Yeah, damn. Good Lord. Oh, shit. Shit, I can't even walk in here. God damn. Ooh. Oh, damn. Okay. In Rome, the galley priests would dance in the street with tamarines and flutes, cut themselves, and tell people fortunes. I'm going to speed through this thing here, so I got to run. Thus, they were extremely visible, and Paul would have been aware of their behavior. Since Attis and several devotees were found in Galatia, Paul might readily recall this quote from his mission work there. In Galatians 5:12, he desired that his opponents from Jerusalem will castrate themselves. Huh? And that this might have been a sarcastic allusion to the Attis priests, which the Galatian audience would have appreciated. Paul would have encountered the stable priests in Corinth if he's in Rome. Perhaps Paul is throwing on a loose allusion to Attis priests in a freewheeling condemnation of the ISIS cult in Romans first. Or perhaps ISIS priests at times were castrated. Would this be why Lucius in the Golden Ass chose not to become an ISIS priest, even though he did not mention it? Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. I might continue this later, tomorrow. I'll probably, if I don't continue this today, I'll have another topic probably today. Continue on another subject or have something to do with this because I got quite a while to deal with this thing here. But I thank everybody for tuning in. It's only 3 people. I don't know how many other people was watching and stuff. But I'm gonna leave it right here. And we'll wait for part 2. I hope y'all learned something. You know what I'm saying? I definitely did. So most of this I didn't even read before I did the video. So with that, please hit the like button. Support it, the Cash App. I add you to the supporters list, which I gotta put in the chat later. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, JJ, you can talk about me all you want and stuff. It's all good. I'm mouthful today. You know, he want to do what he want to do and stuff and make fun of himself. Really. So with that, y'all, I'm up out of here. Killer B, the Witchfinder General, and I'm out.